everybody, welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips, the Monday edition, with me, your host, Anne, Disembodied Hands, Quindy, and her servitors, Justin and John. How are you all today? Actually, Crowley, you'd be horrified, but I've actually, I've taken steps to cut my caffeine consumption in half, and it wasn't that high to begin with. I'm also dropping sugar almost entirely out again, and I've cut down. It's a hospital thing, Pendrake. I assume it comes from some sort of hospital speak. Yeah. Well, I was feeling really crappy. I was just feeling really, stressed and overwhelmed and crazy, and realized that I'd let my consumption creep up again, and yeah, so I feel better already over the weekend. I started working it down. I don't believe in cold turkey. I mean, I've done it, but I think it works better for me if I give my taste buds and body time to kind of adjust. So, yeah. Totally going down. And also, no eating after 7:30 p.m. So I'm doing a full 13 hours between meals at night, because that also hits my sleep. I don't know about you guys, if you've ever noticed if you eat late at night that it really affects your sleep, but it does mine. So yeah, all sorts of little adjusty things. But I already feel like yesterday, my energy in the evening definitely kicked up. There we go, Turgeon. Awesome. It's all that Latin they have to learn in medical school for all the parts of the body and everything, right? Coffee stats. Yeah, minus wisdom for sure. Minus sleep sometimes. But yeah, I've noticed. I was hoping, because I always had a lot of energy, right? I've always been the Anne that could get a ton of crap done. So much stuff done that other people were shocked at how much I got done. And then I've noticed as I get older, though, that started to creep it down. And I miss my energy in the evenings, so I thought maybe that making a couple dietary changes would help. And yesterday, usually by the time it hits evening, I'm just exhausted. I'm cashed. I'm done. But yesterday I was like, oh, I could work on a few things, so maybe it'll work. Hopefully it'll work. There's science behind it, so yay science. Yay science! For some people, Crawley, for some people. I used to know somebody who could just Joe Orteza, sculptor and painter, Golden Demon winner. Joe is infamous for having a cup of caffeine in both hands at cons, and he still can manage to do amazing work. So, let me see here. But it's very individual, right? It has a very individual reaction, just like everything. Oh no, garbage disposal. Oh no, Quindy. They probably had to buy a part. That seems to be the thing. Well, we don't feel like working. Let's just tell them we have to go buy a part. Cue Home Depot run and, extended lunch hour. Yeah, ginseng has never been and again, it's always, everybody's biology is really, it's really different, right, Bruce? Ginseng never really jived with my body, but oh yeah, and everybody is different. Well, but now you know, Pendrake, and you didn't need much. It just took Turgeon looking it up. What do I want to do today? I want to block in my gold and silver, and maybe do some extra stuff. We'll start with this, though, while we talk. Okay, and starting a little darker with my gold. Since I dug out my NMM Gold Shadow, I'm using that. I need to put in a Reaper order for paint. Right, you'd think so, Quindy. I think doctors use stat because it's fast to say. Hello, green users. Yes, bodies are weird and management won't respond to queries and complaints. Yes, exactly. So that's why each of us has to like figure out our own way of making ourselves function the best, right? And for me, I definitely was unhappy with how I was functioning, so it's time to make a few changes. I did, when I started gluten-free, I did go completely off sugar for like 3 months. That's when I lost the 15 pounds on that diet. And then I went keto after that. But I don't like totally being without sugar because then if you do eat it, even accidentally, your body really reacts, or my body really reacts badly. So keeping a tiny bit of it in here and there, I think is okay. And I don't want to really go into keto again, so I prefer to keep low carb, not straight keto. So we'll see. I guess it depends on how universal garbage disposal parts are. Because that's the thing, right? Different garbage disposals might use different motors. And then, of course, yeah, then it makes no sense, like Pendrick says, to leave a part lying around. Though I don't know. I have never been a maintenance person. I have no idea the situation. I'm sure they're overworked and underpaid. And garbage disposals are a common thing that breaks, right? Fairly common. I'm going to use cloudy gray for my silver, and I'm going to work in some blue, and I know I use tropical blue and spectral glow, so I'm going to use a tiny bit of tropical blue here in the silver to tie it in. And I'm going to start a new line for that. Though I think this silver, I'm going to put one coat on it, guys, but then I'm going to very much highlight this in like, as if it's cloth. I'm going to do an overall highlight, and I see that I've got a little bit of mold line that I missed here. I got some of it, but it looks like I still have some. This is a hard place to get mold lines off of because you've got the arm in the way on one side. So trying to get those mold lines off can be hard positioning. So just do your best. I do find that the knife is best for bones black. Just gonna see. Sometimes I can't see the mold lines that great from one angle, so I have to go back and check that I got them. That's probably how I missed that one in the first place. Okay, but yeah, once we get to the point where we are putting paint, like highlights and shadows on these scales, it's going to be painted all like it's cloth at first, and then it's going to be, then we'll go in and do details. But trying to do every single scale in NMM actually isn't going to give you a very realistic look at all. It does make sense that they would have garbage disposals. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe, you never know. Maybe the apartment complex is cheap and told them to only buy things if they needed them. You never know, right? I have lived recently in an apartment complex that was ridiculously cheap considering how much we were paying. So I totally understand that that is a thing. Yeah, all too common, Agent Marvel. Well, you know, we had to do something different, and people always complain they don't know how to paint, like, how to do pastels. But I find pastels very easy. So that's why Mr. Jin is being done in pastels. Plus, he's totally manly, and he's up for it. He's like, yes, paint me in pastels. I will be like the Miami Vice guys in the 80s, rocking those pastel garbs. And almost all of them run by companies now, right? Except for the little apartment places. Little mom and pop places, which are usually not the ones in the really nice sections of town or decent sections of town, because that's expensive. Although actually there are a couple little privately owned ones in downtown Mountain View. I used to walk by one. It was just like a tiny apartment complex with six units. 6 units and no parking, but who knows how expensive it was. Yeah. Arabian Vice, exactly, Turgeon. Alrighty, alrighty, alrighty. Yeah, and I want some blue in that, right? So let's get that tropical blue out. My favorite. Oh, that's Glacier. Well, Glacier and Tropical are really close cousins. Where did I put my tropical blue? Did I eat it? I may have eaten it. It's around here somewhere. Man, I'm just terrible lately with my paint. I'm like, I know I was just using tropical blue. Oh, wait, I left it up here because I was using it. I was using it on the dragon head. But these guys are just like, really Glacier is just a slightly lighter, slightly greener version of Tropical. So you could use Glacier in here if you wanted to. Just to give it a hint of some other color. Again, we don't want it too monochrome or it's going to look weird. Alrighty, mixing brush. Japanese samurai armor. I thought there was something Middle Eastern, but yeah, this Japanese samurai armor. There's a couple of instances of them in history. I thought there was something more Middle Eastern that was this way also, Pendrake. Which is why it would show up on a genie, but maybe not. But yeah, it's a thing. If in fact, if you look at the, if you ever watched the Lord of the Rings movies, if you look at Return of the King when they're in Mordor and all those armies are marching by them, they've got armor like this. Yeah, peaced out. It's typical, Quindy. It's typical. Hey, at least they came in. Yeah, Persian. Thanks, Polly. Maybe that's it. Because there was a lot of Persian, like, aesthetic feel in those, like, with the elephants and everything, and the evil armies in Mordor. So maybe that's what I was thinking. So I wanted to start blocking in the gold because I'm at that point of the figure where I really do want to see the color composition, especially with one like this, which has a lot of different colors. You can get yourself in trouble fast. So I was like, all right, I'm going to start blocking this in. I like the little demonic, like, or funky face there. Air spirit, air demon. We call it an air demon face. This guy's cool. I like this guy. We won't necessarily do this whole face in gold. I'm just going to do it this way first because if I'm going to do a colored inlay on an elaborate piece of jewelry like this belt buckle, then I'm going to do it all in gold first and then do cutouts of the colors, instead of trying to paint around all these areas that I want to be a different color. David and I were talking last night about the differences in our painting styles, and because I was working at my vampire from Curse City, and I had put it aside because I was really disgruntled and I didn't like the wolf pelt color at all. And he's like, well, just you know, like pop the highlights, or you know, like just you know, it's so monochrome. It needs to be like have more brights and shadows. And I'm like, this is the difference between you and me, because he will go with his, if David were painting this figure, he would have all his lights and shadows blocked in, like with almost no midtone sometimes. He would just block in lights and shadows. And then he'd go back and refine and add depth. Whereas I start more or less flat and more subtle, and then I pop up my contrast at the end. So this just goes to show you there is no one way to start a model. There's no one way to paint. But it was funny because he's like, oh, it just needs more contrast. I'm like, no, that's not the way I paint. Oh, I think, oh, that probably should be gold also. Now we have to play the game of all this crap on the belt, which is every single one of these models, right? have all this crap on the belt that we have to figure out what color it is. But I think that this is the bottom part of this belt up here, so I'm going to make it gold. And we've got a lot of lining to do in here too, to set it all off. But yeah, so keep that in mind sometimes when people give you advice on how to fix something, is they're always coming from the perspective of how they set up a model. And it may be helpful if they set up a model similar to the way you do. But if they don't, then it might not be helpful at all. Although trying their style can be fun, but maybe not when you're in the middle of a model. Well, if you found it in Japan, it exists. And therefore, I will say that perhaps, like me, Jason thought it was like Persian style or Middle Eastern because of the Lord of the Rings movie, and either that or there is an example and you're just not finding it online. Because Jason usually knows his art and history pretty well. Alright, so I need to decide about this, the leg part. But I'm gonna, it almost needs to be silver though, because it's gonna have gold all around it. I originally was thinking it might be gold. But now I'm looking at all this other stuff and going, maybe not. So alternating always is where I'm at. So that means we get a nice, either we go silver and silver, or we do a nice shiny gold or bronze knee pad. I think we do that. That'll be fun. And his shoulder pads are going to be gold anyway. He's full of bling. He's a genie, let's face it. He's got a lot of bling on him. Thinking I might give this one to Jason, depending on how fishy. If fishy turns out really well, then maybe we'll give that. Or maybe I'll do it to Jason what I did to Bobby and give Jason the choice, and Ron gets the one he doesn't take. I'm just gonna say that there's a historical reference we're not finding. Like I said, I was pretty convinced there was one, but I mean, I haven't done art history or anything. I was purely pulling it from fiction. So, and certainly fiction can be, I mean, it could be as simple as Peter Jackson was like, oh yeah, this is Persian, but let's put it upside down because Mordor is evil. I mean, it could be just like that, right? Except that obviously there is an actual precedent for it in history, just not in Persia that we know of, or in the Middle East. It doesn't bother me, let's say that. I knew there was at least one historical precedent, so it doesn't bother me at all. It's just a thing. Alrighty, and then up here. So we're getting our gold blacked in. We're going to also black it in up top I want gold beads here. I want gold up there. It's going to be a lot of gold on this guy. But it's balancing pretty well, so. Yeah, Thornmill. He could just be into style over function, you know? That could be it. He could be that kind of genie. But personally, I really like the figures, so. In fact, if I had to really point at one, I think this is my favorite out of the four. But then I am also a big Arabian Nights fan, so that's really not a surprise. Ah. So Papa had her first puppy obedience class yesterday, and I signed her up for a couple more in December to use out our package. We bought a package of classes, so we have to use them all before they expire. But I mean, considering she had a ton of puppies that she really wanted to play with all around her, she actually did pretty well. Much better than I expected her to, although it's very hard to get her to stop fixating on the other puppies when she really wants to, when there's one that's already kind of acting out and she really wants to play. It's really difficult to get her to focus. But she's a bit of a flibberty-gibbet anyway. Yeah, exactly, Bruce, exactly. But yes, Pupster had to do her focus practice on me, and we practiced our first, well, other puppies practiced their first stays, but Kiki was not nearly focused enough to do a stay, so the best we could do is a wait. We need to start from baby steps with Kiki. She was very, very, very overstimulated in a very short period of time, but at the end of class, we got to play with the agility equipment, which we always like. And they dragged out the big A-frame. So she got to go over the big A-frame and back. That was cool. She pretty much ran over it. Like full tilt. Which is so Kiki. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't going to be bad. It was just like whether it was going to be really a trial for me if she if she was totally going to check out. That was my question. Was Kiki going to completely check out and not listen to me at all, or was I going to be able to keep her attention for part of the class and, you know, work on a few things? And I managed to keep her attention for part of the class and work on a few things, so there we go. Win. Okay, and then I don't know what I'm going to do with these I don't know what these little things are. Like if they're little, I don't know. I'm going to assume they're baubles and they're going to have an accent color at some point, probably blue, but I'm not, it may be the teal though. Yeah, maybe we'll go teal with that. But I'm not going to play with that yet. But yeah, teal is the most likely suspect. I do need to put gold around all of this stuff. Oh, yeah. But you know what? Yeah, to puppy one is, yeah, you want other puppies, right? Well, geez, you should come over to where I am, Miss Dimp. We have so many freaking puppies, I can hardly fit Kiki into a class. We were pretty lucky with our puppy classes. We had at least 3 other puppies for all of them. But it's proving very hard to get her into the puppy obedience. I had to like book 3 weeks out. And I didn't want to book earlier because I wanted to see how she did and if it was worth it. But yeah, that's a bummer that Malcolm didn't have any other puppies. I would almost check around, like call around to different places if you have more than one option near you, and find out if there is a venue that if you call them and say, hey, do you have puppies actually coming to your puppy 101s, and go with that. Might be worth that. The big thing with Kiki now is finding groups that have dogs that are big enough. Because Kiki is too rough of a player, like too energetic around baby dogs, little dogs. She's a little too much for even most bigger dogs. So they have, the place I go is nice. It has, they call it regular play groups and then shy dog play groups. And shy dog is also small dog. Because the big dogs get kind of crazy. Good. Yeah, Kiki's done. We've done. We just did some basic walk over the jumps when she was little in the puppy intro class. And the tube, the inner tube. Weirdly, if I can get my energy back, I feel like Kiki could actually be a competitive dog. Like, she has the energy. We would need to build focus, but I feel like she could actually do agility. Like, you know, she's a big dog, so she's not going to be very successful at it probably, but you know, in her weight class, I feel like she could actually run an agility course, whereas none of my other dogs. I've not felt that with any of my other dogs. Except maybe Blazy. Blazy might have done it. All right, I'm going to do the lamp as well because I keep forgetting it's down here. Oh, only has puppy classes during your work hours. Yeah, that's what's nice around about Zoom Room where we are is it's they have classes on weekends, evenings, and during the day, and they really mix it up. So I was able to get into a puppy class on Saturday morning, which they've actually got 2 sessions on Saturday mornings because it is the most popular session. That's a bummer that it's only during your work hours. That is where I have an advantage since I work for myself now. It's kind of really nice actually to be raising a puppy like this and being able to, though she disrupts my schedule when I do it, but being able to disrupt my schedule to get things done is nice. There, that makes the nice lamp stand out. Yeah, we drive a bit to get to this particular training center because I chose it because I recognized it from a franchise. It's part of a franchise that I knew in Texas that was really well regarded. So I was really excited actually to get to start going to it. But they do everything. Their obedience classes are natural workups to getting your dog canine good citizen. So I don't know. I would need to do a lot, like every week classes. I would need to do that, and I hadn't been able to do that for a while because of my health and scheduling. So we'll see if I can start going once a week regularly. The problem is that I do need to sacrifice my weekend day to do it, and you know, sometimes you just don't feel like doing that. Much as I love my Keekster, I still do. There's a lot of training I can do on my own. It's not like I need them to train me to train my dog. I just need the proofing and the socialization. I did get Kiki one of the harnesses that clips onto the front of the chest. We'll see how it does. I think she's smart enough to circumvent it, but maybe it'll let us walk her. I was not going to do it because I really would rather train her to walk nicely, put in the work. But the problem I ran into this last week is my back. because it's a faulty back. Yeah, the distractions are useful. But yeah, she's getting strong enough now that when she whips around and tries to run out to the end of the leash, she can really torque my back. And we hit a point on Friday where I was just like, oh, that was not good. And so that decided me is that I'm going to have to use a training aid, which I wouldn't normally do. Normally I would just wait her out until her adult brain cells kicked in and she learned not to just run to the end of the leash when she wants to get back home. But yeah, so we're going to do the clip to the front harness. Yeah, that's what I figured, Thornmills. This will train Kiki not to do that, because that's really the dangerous part for my back, right? I mean, I do a lot of exercises. I do exercises morning and evening to help my back stay, pretty much great most of the time. But yeah, the Kiki is definitely putting a bit of a load on it. All right, so we've got that, and this one is really kind of odd, but we'll just do it. I could have painted a lot of this gold, but I decided I wanted it more blue, so we'll just do the little gold bits between the coral bits. Just kind of trying to really space out the colors over the model. So color composition is all about that. It's about repeating colors all across the model and spacing out the colors so that you have little touches of them in different places. So because I had so much of the coral down here, I had to make the turban or something else appear. That coral color, I still need the touches of blue because of all the blue and teal down here. And now, since I have a bunch of gold down here, I need to bring gold up here so the shoulder pad will have a lot of gold on it. And then, of course, the hilt of the sword will be gold as well, so that'll essentially bring the gold all around the model. Adult brain cells really are a thing for at least puppies. Yeah, and when Kiki's an adult, I'll be able to teach her more effectively. She'll be more of a listener because she won't be just a crazy, frenetic puppy. She does know. She knows she's not supposed to pull because on our walks out, she's perfect. On our walks, when we're heading away from home, she's perfect. But when we turn around to go back, then it's pull time. And it makes it a trial. I mean, I was being pretty good waiting her out before, just stopping. When she pulled, I'd just stop. You don't get what you want unless you stop pulling, And there were days where she was improved and days where she definitely had a hard day. But I feel like I can teach her. It's not like she's not an impossible dog to teach to do this. I just need her to be more in the habit of engaging and really listening to me, which as a tiny puppy, it's a work in progress, right? Some puppies will just they want to work with you and they want to do, anything with you. Kiki wants your attention until Kiki gets distracted. So Kiki's actually quite a challenging dog to train because she has a lot of energy. But she also has part of her that has the this is too much work gene, and she also gets overstimulated and frazzled pretty easily. So she is a harder train. I think she's not as hard as my reactive crazy dog that I had, but she's close because she does have the same energy he had and the same lack of focus as a pup. So it's just, it is what it is. She'll be a brilliant dog eventually. Not around there, huh? Kiki definitely is getting more adult brain cells. She's much better behaved. She has finally stopped biting. Notice the last scar. There it is. Otherwise, I'm blood free. I have scars, but they're fading. But she stopped biting, so that finally happened after last week. So progress, guys, progress. We've gotten past the bitey puppy, and now we have to get to train the puppy better. She's getting better about putting her collar on and off, and putting her leash on and off. With our dogs, with Shilohs, you definitely get a maturity shift. Usually around 6 months, a little bit, and then you get another big maturity shift around 1 year, where the energy drops off a bit and everything gets a bit more manageable, and your dog like gets the ability to pay a little bit attention to you a little bit better. I remember this with Leo. I remember noticing it specifically right around 1 year, that he'd really matured. Oh yeah, right, Miss Imp. Yeah, when you have other dogs, it makes it harder. I did used to have to take Thorny out on his walks alone. And I took him always out in the yard alone. And it makes it hard, right? Yeah, because your other dogs really want to be with you too. And doing stuff. Yeah, multiple dogs. Like, the most I'll ever have again is 2. It's just too much. I have younger friends in the breed, in Shilohs, who are looking at getting their 4th dog, or who already have their 4th dog. And I'm just like, yeah, that was my breaking point. Especially having one of them who was troubled and couldn't be out with the others. It was a lot of work, a lot of stress. It taught me a lot about training, and but it was a lot of work. I don't want to do that again. Oh yeah. Kiki's still pretty funny. Like, she'll every once in a while have the, darting around in front of you so that you constantly are tripping over her kind of thing going on, but she's getting better about that. I'd honestly rather have that than the pulling. Yeah, he doesn't hear the others. Yep. Yeah. One, it helps to get him out with other dogs, because just the fact that you have other dogs isn't enough, right? Because those dogs are the pack. And that's different from strange dogs. So now Kiki has gotten much better since the classes. She's much, much better when she sees strange dogs on the road. She's just curious about them and wants to sniff them. Whereas the first time when we were taking her as just a tiny puppy for a walk, we ran into a dachshund and she was terrified, and a chihuahua and she was absolutely terrified. But then after a couple puppy classes, she came around. So, all right, I think we've got all our gold blocked in. Now we're gonna do our silver, and we're gonna do it very much in big blocks. So I need to get my shadow and my highlight color, and I need to decide where my light sourcing is coming from so I can really see it. Because if we're gonna, and this is a good time to do this because the Bones Black material is a little shiny. So this is a bit of a wonky, this is where the mold line is, but if I turn the model on its back and I look at where the light is coming, it's very much going to be a section like this. And let's see if I can, yeah, it's going to be a big band going down the back. And then I'm going to want to put shadows and then another highlight over here. And since this is silver, it will end up reflecting some of this, but I'm not going to put that in right away. I'm terrified of dachshunds too, so there you go. I couldn't blame her with the dachshund. And then another shadow here, and then we'll work around to the front where we'll have another highlight. Here it's going to be the same thing. You see that each of these has a highlight, but you also see that the middle are lighter and the sides are darker, and that's how we're going to be blocking in that silver. So let me get out my gray liner. But yeah, I think Chihuahuas and Dachshunds have I don't remember what breed is bitiest these days. I do remember a few years back it was Chihuahuas, and a few years before that it was Dachshunds. But yeah, I have met sweet dogs of both breeds, so it's not like it's a breed-wide thing. But I'm going to use a little bit of a different thing. I'm going to try using mostly gray liner, but just like with the gray, I put a bit of blue in it. I'm going to put a bit of Death Knight Black into my gray liner. Death Knight Black has blue and violet in it. Pretty terrifying, yeah. Aww, Clavicus, that's very sweet of you. Thank you for gift subbing. Tiny land sharks are your fave. Like I said, I've met some very sweet Chihuahuas. And I've met some pretty rabid Chihuahuas. But yeah, that could be true of most breeds, really, if you stop and think. Ah. But yeah, the Keekster, she's improving. David is taking her for walks now in the morning on the weekends. The weekdays, it's too busy on the road in front of us. She gets kind of like, whoa, deer in headlights, but... So we'll put 4 drops of Gray Lantern. I'm going to put 2 drops of the Death Knight Black in there. The other thing this Death Knight Black is going to do is it doesn't have as great coverage as a lot of the liners. It's more translucent, and that's because of the pigments that are in it. They just don't have as high coverage. Blues and violets don't have as high coverage as like browns and stuff. So essentially, putting a couple drops of this in here will make it a little more translucent, and that is good when I'm trying to blend it into NMM. Long hair Chihuahuas are adorbs. I do like the longer hair on Chihuahuas. I will not lie. Cheepoo. Uh-huh. Worst character exists. Oh my god. That sounds terrible. I hate to say this, but a lot of the last dogs, like when older people get like what they consider to be their last dog, a lot of the last dogs I know of are pretty train wrecky. I don't know if it's just that they don't have as much energy to train the dog, or they're expecting, they don't remember how much work a puppy is. That's sometimes the case. Or maybe they just got, the demon dog that they weren't expecting. But yeah, I do know that my parents are an exception. They raised an excellent dog in their, older years. But I also know a couple of real train wreck dogs that just got no training, no structure, and turned into real nightmares. Alrighty, I'm going to put a little bit of my gray into here because I want just a little bit of white in that, and to give it a little more opacity. There we go. Pull those together. Now we're going to get our pure white out. We're going to do some wet blending on here. Or they spoil them rotten, right, Miss Him? Yep. And sometimes old and don't care anymore. Yep, yep. Yeah. I think one of the ladies I know, she had corgis, and she, raised 2 corgis, and they were just fine dogs. But then she got a new one, and he was more strong-willed, and she wasn't used to having to train or give structure. Because that's a thing, right? Dogs are individuals. Even within a breed, you do get some variance in temperament. So she just wasn't used to dealing with, and she just couldn't understand why the dog was so horrible at a year old. Because all her other dogs were fine at that age. But her other dogs were really laid back and didn't need a lot of structure. So... Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so no socialization or anything, right? And he also probably ran the house. That's a dog thing when they run the house, because they essentially feel like their human isn't strong enough to be in charge. The human has dropped the ball, and they have to be the protector. That's too bad. It's just too bad when a dog turns out that way. Alright, so I may have thinned that white too much. Part of me thinks I did. Part of me thinks I need to actually put a little more in that. Yeah, all herding breeds do, I feel. But you do every once in a while get the dog that is really just kind of laid back and doesn't need as much, right? Depending on the breed, but... there are Shilohs like that. There are Shilohs that with just a little bit of work are pretty darn awesome dogs. You call them the out-of-the-box dog. Although we tend to tell people there is no real out-of-the-box dog, which is what I believe. But yeah, you do get lucky sometimes. All right, so let's put down some gray, and then we're going to put down a stripe of white right down the front. If you want, because it's Bones Black and not Bones USA, I might do a base coat and then do the wet blend over the base coat. That way I make sure I get coverage. I make sure the paint's adhering before I even start. I did wash this model, and so far everything is adhered fine. But I do find that on rounded, bubbly surfaces like this, sometimes I will want that base coat on there first. So I'm going to pop that on there. And again, this is like a 4-to-1. So 4 drops of paint, 1 drop of water. The 1 drop of water is just to make it smoother, make sure you don't get clumpiness, make it spread nicer, and it's still thick enough to stick to the model. Yeah, but Kiki is definitely a structure dog. The more habits we can get her into, the better. She becomes a much easier dog when she has like habits and a routine. All right, so that's looking okay. I need to make sure I get all of this. If you find that your paint is struggling, like it doesn't want to attach to part of the surface, put on a little bit extra. You're still, if you're thinning it 4 to 1, you're still not gonna like, you're not gonna glob up detail. Yeah. Zoe is Pinky. Yep. Walsh is the brain, huh? That's funny. Oh, I forgot his earring. I just realized. That's no good. Let's go get that. It's like this giant gold ring I kind of need to paint in. But we are almost to the point where we've got everything blocked in, and then I'll have, then I'll be happy. I also forgot his little bit of jewelry up here. And I haven't decided on that gem color either, which may also be the kind of the teal. Alrighty. So I'm gonna let that dry. I'll work on painting. I'll work on painting the rest of this while that dries, and then we'll go and do our MM block in on that. I'm gonna switch to giant brush, I think. We'll see. Giant brush may not work if it doesn't want to get under. It doesn't want to get under the hand there, but maybe it'll work. As far as hydrophobic materials, I do find that Bones Black is a little bit worse about this stuff than other things. I didn't have any problems up to this point. Maybe I do need to make my gray a little thicker. Hold on. Because it could be just that I thinned the gray a little bit too much. Though the viscosity doesn't feel off to me, so I'm not entirely buying that. But I don't know why these particular parts of the model would decide to be harder to paint over. So let's get a little bit more viscosity. If you really have a hydrophobic part of the model, you can go without any water in the paint. Just be sure that you are pulling it pretty thin over the surface then. Once you see that it is adhering. With an area like this with so many scales, you'll often get air bubbles between the scales, so you do want to kind of look at it after you've put your paint on. And make sure that you're not missing anything. And we'll keep going around here, go a lot faster. Then we'll go back and address any gaps. Going with a really big brush back here does let me base coat really fast. It's a soft brush, note, so it's not going to scrape the paint over the surface, which helps to prevent bubbles from forming. And also helps the paint adhere if you are getting a surface that's fighting you a little bit. Stiffer brushes will leave brush marks far more readily. And if you do have a hydrophobic surface that you're trying to put paint over, it's going to fight you more. And they will create more bubbles. Hey, Necro. We're blocking in some, what's going to be some steel NMM. And then I'm going to do a quick highlight and shadow block in on it and the refine. Alright, so now I've got this side, I'm just looking for bubbles between the scales. I'm looking for areas the paint didn't adhere to between the scales. And getting those with the tip of my brush while everything's still wet. If you wait until things start to really dry, then you're going to run into some problems. If you notice your paint is tacky, stop immediately, or you'll peel stuff up or make globs. So as long as you can see that it's wet. There we go. I think we're good. So that's a nice base coat for us to work from. Now we've got everything dry on the front leg, so let's do it. Hey, Roger. And I'm just gonna, with the gray on my brush, I'm just gonna start just bringing in that. Going to bring in some of my shadow color here. And I'm gonna start blending everything kind of together. Note that individual areas on these little bubbles will get additional highlights, but we need to remember that there's a general highlight as well, and general shadows. Like there are definitely little plates here where more light is falling, and little plates here where less light is falling, even if each plate still gets a shadow and a highlight itself. And I'm going to start just mucking around, trying to figure out the right percentage of darks and lights and mids that I want to get the general effect. But this leg is a cylinder, so we're just going to have a pretty broad highlight down the front. With steel NMM and silver NMM, it is much easier to do it with wet blending if you can, because it's going to let you get closer to that transition from pure white to near black and back out again, which is very hard to do with layering on a small surface. So we've got a general feel for where the highlight is. And I will come in with more highlight. This is all just, uh-oh, puppy got left with her water bucket. 1 second, let me rescue the water bucket. We all know how that results in extreme spillage. 1 moment. Papa, you settle down. You know that that's the cue. There we go. Alrighty. Now I could go down, I was using my giant brush, but I could go down to a finer brush for this and have more control. What I will do is take my shadow color now, thin it down a bit, and then do lines between these plates now that I've got kind of the feel that I want, and I will refine after this. Now, to train the Anne to take her water bucket up before the stream is what she's training me to do, Pendrake. Most of the time I remember these days. I am, after so many very intelligent dogs in my life, I am very aware of when the dog is trying to train me. And when I am inadvertently training the dog to do something bad. The answer is just not to leave the water bucket down attached to the crate at all. She just loves to splash water all over the floor. It's not like it would be a disaster, but then she'll sit and make herself a puddle, because it'll go in her crate and onto the floor, and then she'll sit and play with it in her crate and make lots of noise. I just gave her an ice cube, so that may also be a bad decision, but we'll find out. But yeah, when you raise smart dogs, you get very, very familiar with when they're trying to play you. And when your reactions are training them inadvertently to do behaviors you'd rather they didn't. I think, at least if you make any effort into learning, like, dog training. Because any attention is good attention, even bad attention, for some dogs, and that's definitely Keeker. She is like that. All right, so I'm going to try to essentially take my gray liner, I'm going to thin it down just a little bit, and I'm going to line between those panels. But I am going to thin it down a little bit because I don't want it to be super strong. Not out the gate. I may take that back and decide I do want it darker. And then there are these little doodads also. Oh, now she'll start digging at her ceiling, but I don't care if she throws her ceiling on the floor. She's going to find it a lot harder because David put her toy bin up on the ceiling of her crate. It's very heavy now. It's going to be a lot harder for her to move. But if she knocks it all on the floor, oh well. Then we find another place for it. I just mostly don't want the water splash because that'll damage the floor if it sits on it too much because it's wood. Wood floor. And it's too easy for some of that water to get under the crate and then you miss it and then your wood floor is damaged. And I happen to like our wood floor, so I'd rather not screw it up. So we've got our shadows. I'm going to get them on the sides here. Won't have Kiki's harness for today, but it should arrive tomorrow. Yeah, I did suggest to David that we get a toy box that we could put on the floor for her. Although at this age, all she would do is go, and she does this with her crate, so I know she would do it with the toy box. She just goes and drags all the toys out into the main room. But yeah, she's probably a little young yet to teach her to put toys away. Although she has started bringing me my slippers in the morning. Mostly because she wants to play with them. But she still does it. So now I see why the dog bringing you slippers is a thing. She loves my slippers, and if David doesn't kick them into the bathroom before he lets her out, she will grab the slipper and bring it to me before I've stepped into them. When she was little, she would just run away with them, but now she actually brings them. All right, so we've got our shadows painted in there, and you can still see the light effect, so that's cool. I do feel like I've got to put a bit of a darker shadow here. I feel like I went real... The thing with wet blending is you should remember you'll never get your darkest darks and your lightest lights. You'll always have them blended into your mid-color or into each other. So wet blending doesn't give you like a finished product. You always have to deepen your shadows again and brighten up your highlights. But it does allow you to do a real quick setup for that, and then you just have to refine it. So in general, getting some darks in here. Yeah, we had last night drop into the 30s here too. I'm worried about my orange tree and its oranges, which are currently greens. Now these are rounded areas here, so and I'm going to thin down my white again because I'm to the point where I really need my white to layer instead of wet blending. So now I need to thin everything down a bit, although I am going to miss this little doodad here. And that brings those into darker relief when I add more, when I make sure my dark lining is really dark. Now, I will have shadows and highlights on these upper parts, but I need to thin the paint. Let's see here. We're going to grab this down. I'm going to transport a bit of each of these into the puddle up here. And then we'll thin it down to a point where we can layer with it. And some little DOG is going to be ARK at us while we do it. But yeah, I'm hoping the orange tree doesn't totally conk out. We do get frosts here every once in a while, and I have to read up on orange trees and how vulnerable they are to frost. The trees that are closer to our house benefit from some protection there, but this tree is out front. Man, I'm just losing everything today. Probably, Grey Wolf, probably. Seb, give me a little bit more there. How do I do what? Water? How do you thin? There we go. I use water because it's a Reaper Master Series, and this stuff it already has Flow Improver in it. Pardon my puppy. So I use a water, and often I'll add a little bit of Reaper Flow Improver to the water, but you don't have to. You can just thin with water with MSP. So mostly here for base coating, I'm doing a 4-to-1 mixture. I'm really crooked here. 1 second. There we go. Much better. But mostly for base coating, I was doing a 4-to-1 paint to water mixture. And then when I start to thin for other applications, I'll drop it to like a 2-to-1. And then for layering, usually a 1-to-1 or even thinner. So right now, my white is probably at about a 1-to-1. This is probably somewhere between a 1 and 2-to-1. I go by feel more than anything because I've been doing this for so long. And I just look at how much falling off the edges of the palette. I can tell how thin it is that way. That's why I use a well instead of a... I really am crooked here. What did I do to myself? There we go. Probably knocked it with my arm. But yeah, so those are mostly the ratios. I have a PDF on my Patreon for what ratios of paint I thin to for all the different applications of painting. It won't help you too much if you're a wet palette user, because wet palettes are, you kind of are making every brush full as you go. But if you use a well palette, or if you're willing to learn to use a well palette, it can give you a better gut instinct for how much you need to thin your paint to get certain effects. So on my Patreon, if you're not subbed, there are public posts, and one of those public posts is a PDF that goes with my thinning MSP paint video that is on Reaper's YouTube. That was a class I did for ReaperCon during the pandemic, an online class. And it pretty much, I talk about how much to thin your paint for all the different painting techniques. You can also just check out my YouTube, which has a bunch of videos on just technique and getting started in mini painting if you're new. Although I haven't gone, I guess in the control your paint one in there, that would be worth watching as far as thinning. The thinning MSP paints thing is like an 1.5-hour class, whereas my YouTube control your paint video is like only 8 minutes, I think. So depends on how much attention span you have and how much in depth you want to go. A note to you, other paint lines may require more thinning because a lot of them use a thicker base, a more goopy base, that is essentially formulated for opacity, for coverage, which means it's going to fight you for transparency. It's not going to want to go transparent as readily, so that usually means you have to add more water or mediums. But since I use primarily MSP, that's the ratio I'm at. There we go. Okay, let's get into this highlights. Does that answer your question? Also, with other paint lines, I almost always add Flow Improver. Like 100%, because it doesn't have it already in there. And I find that Flow Improver just helps. A long time ago, I worked for Games Workshop in the retail arm, and when I left, all of my fellow employees complained because I had doctored all the store paints and they worked so much better. I had just put like Flow Improver and Drawing Retarder into every bottle, and it made them work better, so everybody was like so sad when I left. Yeah, well, it gets warm during the day, Miss Dimp. It just gets cold at night. Seb, I usually advise people use both. I find that the wet palette can be really fun, and it can enable you to paint faster, and it has pluses, but the well palette lets you thin things really precisely. And if you have one like I've got here with lots of little wells in it, the little wells are key because it lets you just put like 4 or 6 drops of paint in and then thin it with however many drops of water, and it'll stay wet and at that consistency for like, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on, is it hot and dry where you are? Obviously, then you need to add a little more water after like half an hour. But here, I don't usually have to re-add water to my paints for at least 45 minutes, which is more than long enough to finish whatever section of the model I'm working on. As what I said, if you're having trouble with paint consistency on a wet palette, doing this sort of thing and painting with the well palette for a while gives you a feel. It gives you a gut feel for what a 2-to-1 paint mix feels like, right? And looks like. It gives you a feel for what a 1-to-1 mix feels like. It lets your gut kind of like get a feeling for how thin or how thick of a paint you want to execute on a given technique. And that's something that the wet palette doesn't, because it's always wicking water, you know, either up or down. And, you know, when you're running your brush across it, that's going to change, you know, the amount of water on your brush and things like that. So, yeah, it can be very challenging, especially if you've got, it depends on what kind of thinker you are and how you learn. But if you're really analytical like I am, then I think the well palette is the way to go, because your analytical brain is going to love the fact that you can precisely thin everything in ratios, and then it lets you get a feel for everything before you just throw yourself willy-nilly onto the wet palette. I'm much better with the wet palette, having been very good with the well palette for a while. So yeah, I mean, everybody's different, and if some people are very much more, they like to just throw themselves in and learn. David is like that, my husband, and so he just pretty much just bludgeoned himself with the wet palette until he understood it. But for a lot of people, that's really frustrating. Like, that's not their process. So just kind of ask yourself, like, you know, how do you learn best? And if you think that you've got more of a methodical or analytical mindset, then I would definitely consider trying the well palette for a while. It's not as in vogue, but I think it's beneficial. And I don't really care what's in vogue in mini painting. I just want people to like choose the item or line or product that is the least frustrating for them, so that they stay in the hobby. That's what I want. More people in the hobby. More people happily painting little people and dragons and things. Yeah, no problem. I teach a lot, or I used to teach a lot of like people who are new to the hobby, and so I answered that question a lot. And it really is different for different people, but in general, that's why I usually tell people, you know, if you're not sure what kind of person you are, check out both. See which is less frustrating. See which helps you attain your painting goals better, and then kind of work with that one for a while, get really familiar with it, and then maybe give a try to the other one when you notice that the one that you have been using has some weaknesses, right? For me, I find that if I switch to the wet palette, I can do a lot better kind of on the fly blending. Like if I really just want to do, if I'm painting a model with like a limited color palette, it'll encourage me to do interesting blends and maybe give my model a little bit more of an organic feel. But there's a lot of times I don't want that, and I want more precision, because that's just my painting style. So it'll also depend on how your painting style evolves. If you get really loose and really almost impressionistic in your paint style, then you're going to probably be drawn to the wet palette. And if you tend to be more a precise painter, then you may find that the well palette is kind of your cup of tea, because it lets you control the paint really precisely. Oh yeah, fairy dragon, huh? Nice. I'll have to see if I can beg the picture off of her. Yeah, sorry about all the barking. Little Miss Somebody decided that the stream was over when it was a long time till the stream was over still. So these are rounded little plates, and so we need to try to make sure that our highlights are also little ovals as we go down on each of these. And we're going to be putting a lot more light, a bigger highlight, on plates where our white highlight was predominantly, which is in this line, right? Whereas these darker plates are still going to have a highlight, but they're going to have more of a spot highlight or a more focused highlight. We also need to do shadows. Just doing these sections alone is going to be very interesting. Oh, such a squeaky puppy. Well, I've got her on text. I can just send her a text scribble. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we very rarely get hard freezes. Like, I don't know. You would need 3 days, right? I remember from Texas it would need 3 days to get a hard freeze, I thought. I don't know that that has happened here recently. Yeah, but I wanted more metallics. Like, I could have done quilted, but where's the fun in that? You can do whatever you want, Turgeon, but I thought it would be really fun to NMM these. Sometimes I just, like, don't care, and I'm just like, you know what? It could be cloth. It might be cloth. But it also feels much more, like it's not flat. Like, it's really rounded. Each of these little plates is really rounded. And that didn't feel like cloth to me. So that's part of why I did it. But mostly it was that I felt like it would be really fun to do this in NMM. Gonna put in little shadows here and there. Cool. Yeah, I was doing my Discord yesterday a bit, but I didn't get through everything. Thanks for popping that up there. I'm feeling like I was actually going to buy the lighthouse instead of the fairy dragon, but considering supply issues and all that, I'm starting to feel like if you want a big dragon, you probably should just buy it at Kickstarter, like up front, and not wait for it to come to retail. Considering there's stuff that came to retail but very limitedly, or that we're having trouble restocking on the big side. Hey, thanks for the Prime sub, Seb. Thank you, thank you. A sub for the show is a vote for the show. I always tell people that. Because, like, I remember when we were still trying, when I was at Reaper and we were still trying to convince Ed and Dave that doing Twitch would be a good thing. I think they're convinced at this point. I think they're convinced, but, you know, it never hurts. Never hurts. So just trying to bring in. Ah. Yeah, that's true. And different, you know, and the different color of sponge can also give you a leg up in that, right? But you're still going to be working with, like, it's going to be really hard to work with really thin paint. Although it's possible. It's just everything is possible on any type of palette. It's just the strengths and weaknesses. And when you're starting out, just pay attention. And if something is frustrating you, be it well or wet palette, think about trying the other thing. We always get into these fugues as human beings where we're like, but X famous painter uses X, and so maybe I should try X. And in reality, it might not be the best choice for you. But we may persist at it because we're like, no, I'm just not doing it right, or I'm stupid, or I'm lazy, or I'm something, and I know I can make this work. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just not for you. Or it'd be so hard to do that it would just be more worth it to you, and you'd be a happier human being if you went to a different thing. I forget, there's an actual name for that, by the way, that tendency we have to associate somebody else's success with our success. It's something people do with almost every aspect of life. Yeah, I mean, whatever. If it's working for you, Bruce, it's working for you. Like, just because I really like it well, and I feel it has certain advantages, doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily work for you. Like, David hates well palettes. He won't use them. So, you know. Everybody's different. which is great because that means we get like new ideas and iterations and cool stuff in the hobby from people like thinking differently about stuff. Oh my, that puppy is so sad right now. She's like, where is my walk? Where is my walk, Mama? I want to pull you home again. So we're just starting. I'm just playing around with the main highlight and main shadow on some of these. I'm going to work it around to the side a bit more. This is a very complex piece of NMM since it's little rounded plates. And, you know, you can't do it super realistically because although it's a bigger model, it's not a huge model, but still. Yeah, Crow is totally not, like, feasible. Yeah, you've probably watched the fulfillment videos, but it is already so complex to fill orders. Even with Ed and Dave, or Ed having totally refined the process and made it, you know, very as smooth as we can. But I used to be one of those people picking orders for the first few Kickstarters. That was my favorite job, was actually pulling orders. But there's just so many options already that if you had to stop and look at every option to make sure you were getting the right piece, like, or you'd need like 3 times the space if you broke all that out. Like, it would be cool, but I know why it's not feasible, having experienced it. Yeah, almost, right? Christmas tree ornaments. Yeah. The welt palette is what I have learned to do is to clean it immediately afterwards. Like, I clean right after the stream. I will go and clean this palette, and it will take me 1 minute because the paint hasn't dried enough, and because I use thinner paint, it comes up really easily. But that still isn't nearly as easy as just taking the piece of paper off the wet palette and throwing it away. So I get you. I get you. Yeah. Well, but then maybe make a deal with a friend if you can, Crows. Or just resign yourself not to having that model. I mean, we all have existential pain about stuff we can't have. And, you know, if it's like... Because I get it. I don't want a pound of plastic either. And it's why I don't really go into any of those big levels. All right, we're about ready to leave. Kiki, it's almost time. Quiet, please. I'll be out in a moment. It is almost time. I just want to put a little bit of highlights over here. But yeah, probably the best thing then is to try to get a deal with somebody who does want the plastic and go in together so you can have the 1 or 2 models you want. Yeah. Yep, for sure. The other option, Bruce, is to just get a very small palette, like a little one, and right after you use the paint puddle, just wipe it out with a paper towel. And you can go for several days before you really need to soak it. Papa, stop it. Yeah, she just wants to go out. All right, well, we'll let Papa have her way. And there we go. That's at least a start. It's starting to come around. You guys are seeing how it starts to come around. It's pretty cool. I thought that it would look pretty neat. So I thought I wanted to do it. Yeah, and I think they've thought about that, Crows. I think they have thought about that. I think part of it is, though, that, like, maybe if you made it a very small Kickstarter that only ran for, like, 10 days or 7 days, that would work. But if you're going to make a month-long Kickstarter, which tends to get you the most eyes, it's then you're expending a lot of energy in the company because you've got that person assigned to ride herd on that Kickstarter. You've got the graphics people who need to make graphics and you know, stretch goals. if you go really limited, then you can cut down on all that work. But then you ask, do I make enough money to really make it worth it? Or would I just have made an equal amount of money just, releasing this? So, Yes, you sympathize with Kiki? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I haven't used AK, so I'm not sure on the AK front. I do not have any of their paints. I am led to believe that they're somewhat like Vallejo, but in general, Seb, the feeling of Reaper paint is that it's much more fluid out of the bottle. It's not as thick, plasticky, or goopy. And it's more naturally translucent. It's more like using an artist paint where, the coverage is more dependent on the pigments being used than on like some bases are thick so that they give you better coverage. So Reaper is more fluid and takes less thinning to get to the point where you can work with it. One of my big frustrations when I worked with Vallejo, which I used to do a lot, was that I had to thin it so much to get it to the point where I could layer or do like glazes or things like that. And then it would separate a lot. So with MSP, I wanted a paint that stuck to the model better, so had better adhesion, and was more fluid out the gates so that I could thin it easily to the point where I could use it. And that's about it. And now I have to really stop and let my puppy out. But come back and ask more questions because I'm glad to answer. But yeah, in general, Reaper will feel more fluid and you will not need to add nearly as much water. Yeah, the big Kickstarters, they get a lot of fanfare and they let us do a lot of models, which, is good for us. But yeah, no problem. Yeah, you're always welcome to come. I'm here every weekday morning unless there's a holiday or something weird in my schedule. So yeah, you can always come back and ask questions. So, alrighty. So guys, tomorrow, speaking of questions and things, hey, it's Mouseling time again. Mouseling time. Time for lighting. Yeah, well, look at how he looks, guys. Look at how good he looks. I know, Kiki, I know. But he's looking so good. I'm just so happy with this mouse. Just so happy. He's like, now I get to do his shadow side. We need to start on the shadow side. That's going to be fun, too. Yay, Mouseling. All right, so yes, this will be tomorrow, guys. Come back and be on the journey with our intrepid Mouseling. And I hope you guys all have a fantastic Monday. Bark, bark! Oh! She's like cocking her head. I can guarantee it. All right. Lease the keeks. Yes, we got to lease the keeks. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.